Thanks so much, Jody. Okay, so as you guys are aware, the workshop today is called Writing Styles for Postgrads. I would very much like to invite you to raise any questions or any clarifications throughout the workshop. Just interrupt me and speak, and we'll discuss it, and then I'll move on. So it's best to do it in situ if possible. We will have the last thing that we'll do, though, will be questions and answers and discussions. So there will also be an opportunity at the end for that. Okay, so very broadly, if we look at this little diagram here of writing styles, we whether you are here today as an honours student or a master's by coursework, or combined with a master's by research, or that combination, or whether you're a doctoral candidate, there's going to be something here in this workshop for you. I've tried to make it very generic so that it applies to everybody. So we're going to look at writing styles for reports. By the way, can you see, if I have the cursor here, can you see it? Can you? Great. Thanks, Jane. Brilliant. So we'll look at reports, we'll look at essays, the mini thesis. So I'm originally from the School of Education, and in the MEd, in the School of Education, there was always a mandatory mini thesis, which was really just a double unit. I think it was worth 40 points or something. But it was about a 20,000 word little thesis that was actually followed the same format as a normal thesis, a big thesis. So we'll just have a look at that as well. And then I'd very much like to talk to you about the journal article, because I think it's a lovely goal for us all to have, is to publish while we are studying. And literature review. We're going to cover all of these because there are links between all of them. I'm just going to cover some main points that I think are important for you to be aware of. If obviously you might be aware of most of them or all of them anyway, but just to summarize and bring that, just pick out what's important. So we're going to start off. We'll look at the internal structure. So, for example, if it's a mini thesis or a report, the structure follows this general structure, which is you start with an introduction, you have methods, findings, section, discussion, conclusions, references, and appendices, kind of in that order. So a classic introduction will have it'll have this sort of logical flow. You'll start off with some definitions, perhaps about what you're writing about, without getting getting into too much detail, because you don't want to insult your reader by telling them things that they already know, but you also need to show that you know what the definitions are of what you're talking about, depending what your subject area is, of course. And then you're going to have some background context, which is going to be backed up with references. And you'll then drill down a little bit further, and you'll start giving examples of the context. An introduction usually ends with the purpose and the aims of what you're doing. So what is this writing, this particular piece of writing, whether it's an essay or a thesis or a report, or even your doctoral thesis or your master's thesis. It usually ends with the purpose and the aims, and then the very last thing would be signposting. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. This is an excerpt from a science report. So, rather, this is an introduction from a science report. So for those of you that aren't scientists, just bear with the content. But I've put the different sections into different colors. So let's have a look. So the red section is looking at definitions. In this case, it's about homeostasis. So what is it? It's blah, 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 blah. We don't need to read the content of this with a reference. So, because obviously, you got that information from somewhere and you want to acknowledge where you found it. Then the next section is this green section over here, which is going to be giving you the context of why this topic is important and where you're going with it. Then the next section, the blue section, is giving some examples. So exercise is an excellent example of this self-regulating process of homeostasis. And then there are more examples and more examples. And then the second to last is the aim in yellow, or is it orange? Can't quite see, sort of orangey color. So the aim of the experiment is to test what happens to the body during exercise. It's hypothesized. If you're not doing a science report, then you would have the word aim there and not hypothesis. The hypothesis is really just your hunch of what you think is going to, what you think is going to happen in your study. And then, of course, you go on and investigate it, and you'll either be proved right or you'll be proved incorrect, or maybe there'll be a combination of those two findings. And then right at the end, you'll end with some signposting, and you'll say, this essay will discuss, and then you list the different sections of the essay or the report or the thesis or whatever it is. So that's a very classic sort of structure for an introduction. I think the main thing, the next section is methods. I think the main thing about methods is that you've got to know the difference between methodology and methods. So methodology is the big picture. It's often could even be the theory of the method. So it could be, let's say, for example, naturalistic inquiry would be a methodology. Methods, however, they're not that many methods. We get you get surveys, questionnaires, interviews. Interviews can be divided up into semi-structured, open interviews, etc. So there are only a few methods, but of course there are multitude of methodologies. So in the methods section, you're just going to describe how the study was carried out. You're going to give details of the research design, the stages of the data collection, how did you select the participants, who are the participants, if you are using participants. You're going to give details of the ethics approval, and then your data collection, and then your data analysis. So that's pretty much standard for any piece of writing, whether it's a journal article, whether it's a report, or even the mini thesis or the thesis. Then the next section would be findings. This is just the section the section in the writing that presents the results obtained from your study. And of course, there you would include your tables, your graphs at this point. And according to APA, if you're using APA 7th edition, you would head your tables table 1, graphs are headed figures. And also don't forget that it's lowercase when you're talking about it in a sentence. Generally, you don't interpret the findings here. You just report on the findings. You say what they are, and you don't start giving explanations for what the findings mean. That comes in the next section, which is the discussion section. It analyzes and it interprets the results or the data or the findings, and you explain the findings here. And of course, at each point, you will refer to the relevant literature. It's really important to not use any personal opinions or beliefs. So everything must be evidence-based. And by that, I mean that you are referencing, you referring to your findings, and then you are referencing what the literature says about those findings. The key thing here is that you're going to use your references to build your argument in your piece of writing. So we'll talk about that a bit later. The last, one of the last sections is the conclusion. It sums up the key findings, the main take-home message for the entire report. In this section, you state succinctly what your study allows you to conclude about your aim. So the main point here in the conclusion is that you're going to relate back very consistently to your original aim or hypothesis or purpose that you clearly stated in the beginning. It's very important that those two parts of the report or the piece of writing correlate very closely with each other. There's nothing wrong with actually using the same wording in your conclusion that you used in the aim, because the reader then can see the consistency and the logic of your thinking. You've actually answered the question that you set out to investigate. Obviously, references must be cited or referenced correctly, depending on what style you are using in your school. In education, I think a lot of the schools use APA 7th, but I think some do not. So obviously, you have to follow your guidelines. EndNote is great for changing, changing the style. Literally, with a click of a button, you can just turn it into Chicago or Harvard or some other style from APA. It's a wonderful tool. And I just mentioned that all references appear in alphabetical order in the references section. And of course, they must absolutely match. There must be no widows and orphans. Whatever's in your paper that you've written has to also appear in your references section correctly, with the right dates, etc. Lastly, of course, there are often appendices. Typically, that's just information that is useful, but would make the report too long, that you place in the appendix. For example, you might put the survey or the interview schedule. You might put the permissions that you've been given by your participants. You might put your ethics approval, etc., in the appendices. Okay, so if we move on. Essays are the same, except that they don't have a method section. They have a body paragraph. So let's have a look at what the body paragraph looks like. So I think the main thing to note is that, and people, all of us really struggle with this, but every paragraph should start with a topic sentence. I've just taken a little excerpt from my PhD thesis, which is this document over here. I've got a PDF of that, which you can have access to if you would like it. But just extracting one heading out of there. One heading was attributes and behaviors of effective supervisors. You'll notice that in the very first paragraph, the topic sentence says there has been a trend in the literature to focus on the personal attributes and professional behaviors of effective supervisors. So can you see that there's absolutely nothing wrong with repeating? You've got your heading, and the heading is attributes and behaviors of effective supervisors. And then in the topic sentence, you are repeating those words to show the consistency and then, of course, you're adding, in this case, the paragraph is going to be talking about the trends. So the reader then feels very comfortable. The reader can relax because they can see that the writer, yourselves, are logically progressing the argument of the section, paragraph by paragraph. There's a tendency to think that if you use the same words, then it's boring and repetitive. But in fact, the opposite is true. When you use the same words, you actually are showing that your thinking is not fuzzy and your thinking is clear, logical, and consistent. And it causes the reader to relax and trust what's good, that you actually know what you're doing. So it's really, really a useful tip is to repeat the words from a heading in the topic sentence, and then you progress and you develop the argument that you want to, that you have further down in the paragraph. So again, in this case, the second paragraph, it's now a new sort of aspect of this section. But again, you'll notice that it uses the words attributes and professional behaviors, and it just expands on that. So again, it's just showing the coherency within the section is demonstrated by using these same words. Okay, so body paragraphs, the logic of a paragraph is that it expresses and builds one idea, which is summarized in the topic sentence at the beginning. So paragraphs can be as long or as short as they need to be to develop that idea or argument fully. However, no paragraph should be shorter than 3 sentences. They can, however, be over a page long. But generally, if a paragraph cannot be at least 3 sentences, then it either belongs in the previous paragraph or in the next paragraph, because there's very few ideas that can be developed in fewer than 3 sentences. Okay, so at the end of every paragraph, what you need to do is have a concluding sentence, which brings the reader to the main take-home message of the paragraph. And if you can, if you're cunning enough to be able to also link it to the next paragraph, that's called a segue. Segues have to be used kind of quite carefully. A clunky segue is worse than no segue. So, and there's nothing more satisfying than an elegant segue. But you don't need to overdo it. But it is rather nice to have a word from the last sentence that then leads into the next paragraph and expands on that. That's a lovely feeling when you do capture that perfect, eloquent segue. So that's how you end your paragraph. Okay, so one of the main features of good writing in HDR level, high degree research level, so either at the honors, masters, or PhD level, is very intentional use of signposting, phrases and words. So I'll just give you, this is just a piece of writing and I've just highlighted the words in red. So if you see that, just want to move this, you'll see that in the beginning, the very first that I've highlighted in red is, it says one of the benefits. So just to backtrack, the topic sentence is, this strategy was mainly to nominate a group leader. So this is a little piece of paragraph about allocating roles. So the strategy was to nominate a group leader. So that's the topic sentence. Now we know that's what this paragraph is about. Then it starts off, the signposting says one of the benefits. Then you'll see there also the use of the word also. So that's another benefit. And then it's very important to also, in critical thinking, is to tell your reader that you are also aware of what the downfalls are. If they're benefits, then what are the downfalls? So you use that phrase there, one of the downfalls. And then second, another downfall. And then this third, the last sort of section is saying, however, overall, this was a useful strategy, and it expands on that. And then it sums up the paragraph by saying, in the future, this and this and this and this is suggested. So these phrases and words are critical in each paragraph. So it also will help you to see the logic of your writing in your paragraph. When you break it down using these signposts, these words, these transition words that are indicating what each little section of the paragraph is about. So you do that throughout. Obviously, you need to mix it up a bit. You can't use, first, second, third gets used a lot. Overall gets used a lot. But, you've got to sort of not overuse it, but you've got to use it judiciously in your writing. It makes the reader be able to relax, because instead of reading the content and having to work at understanding the logic of the paragraph, you are dishing it out to the reader, and they can actually just use their brains to focus on what you're saying and not on the logic of how you're saying and presenting your work. Another really important aspect is critical thinking. So very, very simply, critical thinking is just presenting both sides of an issue. And you want your reader to be aware that you know that there are sides to the issue, and that you can mitigate. So if one particular aspect is the aspect that you want to promote, then you would obviously have to show that you do know all the other negatives to that aspect, and that you've researched it so that you can mitigate the positive aspects. So in this section I've just highlighted, you can see there that the black section of the beginning is the topic sentence. The red is the positive. The blue is the opposite argument. And then with critical thinking, you can also just give an overall argument about what you think is overall, positive, negative, overall, this is what you think. And then as the last sentence is just the concluding sentence. Okay, so I think the main thing that we need to learn in this high degree research writing styles is how we need to understand what we mean by an argument. It's very, very important that your academic argument is present and clear in your writing. A lot of times we shy away from having an argument, A, because we're not quite sure what it is, or B, we're just not confident in expressing it. But that's really what your examiners, your lecturers, your readers are looking for, is what is your argument? That's what makes a piece of writing exciting, is when you can see the student's argument clearly. So how do we do this? Well, one of the key ways is by using strong referencing. So we have powerful versus weak referencing. Obviously, we're talking about the in-text citations. So I'm just going to use an excerpt from this book by Turner et al. The sentence is, as we engage in any activity, we naturally form an idea of what we are doing. So that was written by Turner et al. And by quoting like that, just making a direct quote with quotation marks, that's the weakest form of referencing, and it should be avoided at all costs, really, because just quoting like that doesn't tell the reader anything about what you think, how you're using it. It's almost like you're abdicating all responsibility for your essay or your piece of writing when you just quote from another person's work. The next dot point is a little bit better, although it's still weak, because you are at least saying that that Turner et al. Have stated this, and then you've quoted what they're stating. So at least you're engaging now a little bit with the piece of with Turner's work, but again, you're not saying how it applies to your argument. The third dot point is slightly stronger, because here you're saying that Turner et al. Are arguing, and then you paraphrasing, and at least there some of yourself is getting, some of your ideas are getting expressed, because you're at least paraphrasing. This fourth dot point is weak again, because you are just putting Turner et al. At the end, and you are not actually using the reference in any kind of argumentative kind of a way. So the last one is probably the strongest, because here you're teasing out the date. You're saying, for some reason, it might be important that you want to make the reader to notice that this research took place in 2011. Turner et al. Explain, and then they explain that the type of engagement assists in forming perspectives about the activity one might be involved in. So here you are actually massaging the quote so that it presents something that's to do with your own argument. Another way of looking at it is I think the key thing here is to be intentional about your in-text citations. You want to show your reader that you're aware. So, for example, in this first dot point, the statement that drinking too much fruit juice may make children fat is content. So you're foregrounding the content there. The second one, if you start off with the author and then you have what the author said, then you're foregrounding the author. In the third dot point, if you are mentioning when the study took place, so not just the actual reference, but you happen to know that the study took place between 2005 and 2007, then you are foregrounding the study. And then in the last dot point, if you then take that information and you say children may be fat because they're drinking too much fruit juice, and this is consistent with Rumble, then that is subtly showing that your argument is that children may be fat because they're drinking too much fruit juice, but you are backing yourself up with some evidence from Rumble's study. So that then shows your point of view, and that is a much stronger way to argue and present your argument than just to kind of take the how can I say, the sort of the less assertive way of doing it by deferring to either the content, the author, or the study. It's as much as possible, you want to be putting your references in terms that show the reader that this is your point of view, and you're just backing yourself up with evidence. Okay, so how does one create your argument? Okay, I just want to quickly move this underneath here, see if that works better. Yeah, okay, so I took this out of my my thesis. The section was called Insights for Supervisory Relationships from the Helping Professions. Now, the argument that I was trying to make was that the supervisory relationship is very similar to helping professions. This was a very, very controversial viewpoint, a very controversial argument. And in fact, it had not been addressed in the literature very much at all. I think there were literally only 2 people who had hinted that the supervisory relationship that we have in high degree research is very similar to the relationship between in the helping professions. This is a controversial and, to be honest with you, a highly inflammatory statement. Okay, so how do you create an argument when your argument is controversial? So you have to be strong, but you also have to make sure that you are providing evidence all along the way so that it's not coming across as an opinion or as a belief. So let's have a look and see. So I've highlighted in red the words that you need to use to strengthen your argument. So when I think the main thing about writing is at this level is that you are extremely aware of what every single word means and why you've put it where you've put it. So let's just look at this first paragraph. So if you say that some studies have drawn parallels, so I wanted to show that there are a few studies that have drawn parallels between doctoral supervision and the helping professions, which include coaching, counseling, and psychotherapy. And then because I said some, I can't just give one reference. I have to give more than one reference because, some implies more than one. If you said a couple of studies have drawn parallels, then you would give 2. So you've got to make sure that the words you use in the beginning of a sentence are backed up by the number of in-text citations that you use. So there I've given 3 citations, which matches the word some to, quite nicely. Okay, then the next sentence is Bartlett and Mercer argue that many aspects of the doctoral supervisory relationship are to be found in a range of other professional relationships, including those in mentoring, personnel management, and supervision between psychoanalysts. So here I'm saying to the reader, okay, this is a sort of a bold argument, and it's not very popular, and it's controversial, but I'm not the only person who says it. There are these other few authors who have talked about this. So I'm building my credentials, so to speak, by using all these authors. Then I continue and I say, similarly, Whisker et al. Note that supervision has in common with mentoring, coaching, and tutoring a one-to-one relationship intended to support a candidate and empower learning. So now basically I've pretty much presented everybody who has said anything about this topic. And as you can see, there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 worldwide authors who have raised this this potential idea. And okay, then I go on and I say, further, Arnold argues that supervisory pedagogy may benefit from interrogating the pedagogical aspects of psychotherapy. So can you see the word may is really important there, because you don't want to say that it definitively that it does, because this is still a tentative area of research that needs to be thoroughly studied before we can say it does benefit. So we use words like may, which indicates to the reader that we're not, that we're thinking very clearly about what we are talking about. And then you'll see at the end, the last 2 sentences are clearly, in order to effectively establish a working relationship with a candidate, the doctoral supervisor is required to have a mix of attitudes, behaviors, and skills in both educational and interpersonal aspects of teaching and learning. That is my idea, that I then back up with some evidence from a peer-reviewed journal article by Grant. So I then say, consistent with this idea is Grant's argument that supervision is different, and so on. So can you see, this is how you create your argument. You insert your idea appropriately after you have shown the reader that you know what has been written about the subject, before you've come along and are writing about this, and you then back it up with evidence from someone else to support your argument. But it's absolutely crystal clear that this is the author's argument, and then there's a lot of evidence to support that argument. The second paragraph is, you'll notice here that there are no references in this second paragraph. So now that we've laid the groundwork, so to speak, by bringing in all the guns that we have, anybody who's ever said anything about this topic, we've laid that out in the first paragraph. Now the second paragraph is all you. It's all your argument. So I'll just read it. It says, it's important to note that doctoral supervisors are not helping professionals, and a supervisory relationship is, of course, fundamentally different from a helping relationship, particularly in that it is not a healing relationship. So right up front, that sentence immediately kind of forestalls a rebuttal by the reader. You're showing that you do know that that's not what you're saying. But then the next sentence says, there may, however, be merit in interrogating parallels between the nature of the doctoral supervisory relationship and the relationship that typically occurs between helping professionals and their clients. I won't read the rest of it because it's particular to this study. So I hope it makes sense. So I'd just like to ask, are there any questions about that at this point? Just want to bring this back. Oh my goodness, how do I do that? Does anybody want to perhaps make a comment there? Jody? Do we still have people in the room, Jody? Can you perhaps see? I can't see because of my PowerPoint.
We still have everybody in the room.
Oh, okay.
You've got a captive audience.
Okay. Well, questions at the end. I will be love to have a chat about those. Okay, so another really powerful tool is the simple verb. So you need to be very, very intentional about how you use verbs in your references. So you use each verb to show that you've read and understood the reference. There's nothing worse than reading a piece of writing at this level, the HDR level, where there are these statements and then these references at the end in brackets, and then another statement and then another reference. And there are no verbs at all to show that you've actually read the article or the book or wherever that information is coming from. So because you see that the verbs that you use give away whether you've actually read and understood the article. So you use these words very, very intentionally, these verbs, to signal to the reader that you not only have read it and understood it, but that you are massaging that reference so that it supports what you are trying to promote, in other words, your argument. So you need to develop a list of verbs. I mean, this one over here is just argues, according to, noted, provides, found, report, suggest, address, observe, describe, show, draw on, explain, assert, recognize, outline, etc. You need to have a list, and this is a short list. You could have a whole page of verbs that you judiciously choose and select the exact verb that describes what the authors were doing when they were writing. I mean, were they criticizing? Were they noting? Were they arguing? Were they just merely explaining? And it gives the person who's reading your work a beautifully nuanced piece of writing that makes it an absolute pleasure to read, because the reader can relax because they start trusting you that you actually have read and understood the reference, and they can just go along for the ride, so to speak, in your argument. You know, they can wait with bated breath to see what your argument is. So very powerful tool is knowing what verb to use, having a whole arsenal of verbs, and you can, just carefully select the right one for the right article. Okay, so what's next up is, I think all of us would agree that it's great to be able to publish while you're studying, whether you're honors, masters, or PhD level. Why wait? If you can have, if you've got enough of the, enough time and energy to publish, then it's a great thing to achieve. So two of the ways that you can publish is through conferences. That's probably the easier way of the two. And if you go to a conference, you can, apply to the conference to either produce this an abstract or a full paper or a poster paper. And of course, you can present a full paper, or you just present an abstract. But the more interesting one and the more challenging one of the two is to produce a journal article in a peer-reviewed international journal, hopefully. And it can either be you can either be a single author, just yourself, or you can co-author with other people. You can co-author with your supervisors, your lecturers, with your peers, or even with people in the field. So how do we achieve that? So I'm going to give you an example from my own research, because it's just the easiest for me to explain. So In the space of 6 months, I published 3 articles in international journals from my thesis. So I want to show you how I did that, because to produce 3 papers in 6 months is, a lot of people would say that's not very easy, but this was easy because I literally just extracted from writing that I had already done. Now, all of you will have produced writing. You either will have produced it through a proposal, you'll have had the confirmation of candidature, a document that you would have produced at the end of your first year of a PhD. In your master's degrees, you will have produced essays with writing. So all of you have got original writing that you can draw on to convert into a paper, a journal article. So this first one, the first article in this list is, the title of it was, "Is Mindfulness a Useful Next Trend in Doctoral Supervision?" That was published by Australian Universities Review. And it is a position paper. So how I got that information was I took my introduction chapter and I added it to my literature review. Now, given that a paper is only 6,000 or sometimes 8,000 words, you obviously are going to extract the salient bits. You're going to summarize very succinctly, but where you're going to get the information is from your introduction and from your literature review. You can present a position paper because people are interested in your work, in what you are, how you are pushing forward the frontiers of knowledge in your studies, in your higher degree research degree. So you don't need to wait. You can actually write a position paper and present. You obviously need to find a journal that's going to match that, a journal that deals with position papers, but you, with the help of your supervisors or lecturers, or just looking even at the end of articles and looking to see who has written a position paper and where did they publish it, and then you can go and approach those people, those journals, and present, put forward your paper for publication. Another opportunity, I haven't done this, but another way is to take your methodology chapter and present it to a methodology journal. I haven't done that yet, but I hope to do that at some point. Then the second one in red, the second article was called "Liminal Emotions and Mindfulness Traits of Well-Regarded Supervisors in Highly Valued Doctoral Supervisory Relationships." That paper was published with Nature Springer. Social Science is the journal's name. And I got that information from the theoretical chapter, plus the findings chapter 5, which dealt with the liminal emotions, and little excerpts from the discussion chapter that was towards the end of the thesis. And by judiciously extracting from the theory, relating it to the findings that was relevant to that theory strand, which in this case was about liminality, and then just extracting the discussion, the relevant parts of the discussion chapter, you can massage a 6,000 to 8,000 word journal article. And the third example, the third article is called "Ways of Being, a Model for Supportive Doctoral Supervisory Relationships and Supervision." That one was published by HERD, it's called Higher Education Research and Development. For a minute there, I couldn't remember. And where that one came from was from the concluding chapter, plus little excerpts from the literature chapter. And what you can do from those two chapters is you can present a new applications, a new model, new construct or a new conceptual framework, which your particular field is very interested in hearing about. So I hope that sort of makes you realize how easy it is actually to publish while you are still studying, because you just need to match up what you've written with a journal that deals with what you have written, and then you just massage what you've written so that it presents it in a way that the journal will find acceptable and exciting to be publishing and disseminating to the body in your, to your field.
Excuse me, Nikki.
Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, when you say publish methodology chapter, do you mean publish your research protocol?
Well, you know how when you're doing, are you a PhD, master's, or honors?
PhD.
Okay, so you've written or will write a methodology chapter.
Yeah, I haven't written it entirely yet, but I've written my research protocol, right, which will probably make a lot of my methodology chapter.
Exactly. So there are journals out there that are methodology journals. So they're very interested in just that chapter.
Okay.
So you don't have to put findings in there. You don't put any of the theoretical or the literature review. It's entirely to do with the methodology, because the methodology is the engine of your research, and you've had to create this method, your methodology chapter. You've had to select and choose and agonize over what's going to happen in your study, right? And you've probably encountered all sorts of challenges and problems that you've had to overcome. Plus, you might even have had all sorts of problems that were unexpected. So writing about your methodology is very interesting to some people. People tend to neglect that. They think, let's just get that out the way. It's not, useful, but it actually makes for very good reading, and it also it can help other people be a guiding light for other people on how to conduct their research. You know what I mean? So it's useful. And you can pump that out quite easily and start getting your publications, your publication list up and running. Does that make sense, Sophie?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So basically, publishing isn't as hard as we think. It seems insurmountable, but when you break it down and you realize that it's just a clever cut and paste job from what you've already written, then all of a sudden it becomes very doable and is great for your it's great for your boosting your confidence. It's also great for honing your ability to argue, present your argument in a way that is acceptable to the at this level. The other wonderful thing about journal writing is that when you present, if your proposal gets accepted, or if you submit your paper and it gets accepted for review, then you proceed to have 3 or 4 people review your work, and they add a huge amount of value to your article, because they are criticizing your article, they're critiquing it, they're saying what they like, what they don't like, they're making suggestions, they're saying, well, did you consider this? Have you read that? Before you know it, you've taken your article from here up to the next level, and it's all done through the journal. It's all free of charge. So it's a wonderful body. It's to be part of the community of scholars is a wonderful thing, and you should really be tapping into that and enjoying that privilege of being able to get the top people in the field's opinions on your work, and also their expertise on your work. Okay, so I
have a question, Nikki.
Yes.
Yeah, so I have submitted one paper for my lit review, but with my previous supervisor, now my supervisor changed. So my new supervisor has a doubt that if I publish a paper from here, from my lit review, so the journal got the copyrights, and I need to change my whole lit review if I use the same
I see where you're going with this.
same material in the paper. Is that an issue? I don't think so, because all PhD students are publishing while they.
I don't think it is an issue, because don't forget your literature review is probably 10,000 words, or maybe less. Your paper is going to be, maximum 6,000 words, say. So you're going to be, you're going to be really distilling it right down. And you're probably going to be adding some of your introduction chapter into your literature review, because you need to sort of position it.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not the same writing at all, is it? It's similar, but it's not the same. And you, as the author of your thesis,
but you mean like still we need to paraphrase the things from, if it's published in the journal, then in a thesis?
Sorry, are you saying that if you publish it, then
so the if I use the same chunks of material and publish in some journal, the journal got the copyrights, and then I can't use those same lines in my thesis.
Right. Okay.
Is that a problem?
It depends on the journal.
Okay.
So, I mean, it is something that you would need to check with the journal, because and a person to speak to are the librarians. One of I think her name's Sue, or I forget now. Anyway, spend half an hour with the librarian that's allocated to your school.
Okay.
Because they are very knowledgeable about
publishing and copyrights things.
And journals. They've got gold and silver, and there's all these different because some journals actually prevent you from using that work for a year or 2 years even. Until, you know what I mean? So you do need to check on that. That's a very good point.
Okay.
And then if you just choose the journal that's not going to be difficult around it, choose another journal that's going to be more lenient around you writing your thesis using excerpts. Because
I observe like many I found the papers, and I found the same person's thesis, like he has completed. So I have lots of theses and their papers. So they have the exactly same material.
Yeah.
In the thesis and the papers.
That's exactly right. So there is a way around it, but obviously I wouldn't just take no for an answer. You know what I mean? Just interrogate it a bit more thoroughly, and you'll find a way around it, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so to end off, I mean, I don't know what the time is. Yeah, I guess we should be ending in a minute. So check when you're writing that you've got an introduction and a conclusion that are consistent. Consistency is key to any of your writing. You want the same words, the same phrases, the same thinking. You don't want to deviate from your aim, your purpose, what you say in your introduction, what you say in your conclusion. All of those need to be coherent with each other, because that then shows the reader that you've ironed out all the fuzziness from your writing. Don't forget that every body paragraph is addressing a different idea, and that this idea is summarized at the beginning in the topic sentence, and then it gets unpacked after that. I must say that when I was writing, when I write, I tend to put the topic sentence last. It's almost like our brains start off with a thought, and then we develop the thought, and then we come to this wonderful concluding thought, which is actually the topic sentence that needs to go at the beginning. So just check that over and over again, because it's difficult to do. Make sure that you've included references in all your body paragraphs, unless it's only to do with your argument. Check all that your references are correct with your particular style. Like if it's APA 7th, check that you are conforming to the latest style edition. It's really helpful to read your work out loud, or even better to read it to somebody, because the minute you read it out loud, you can immediately hear where it doesn't make sense and where it's clunky. And if it's clunky, often it's best just to put 2 sentences instead of one long one. A really good tip as well is to check your spelling, punctuation, and grammar before you submit work to your, if you've got a draft report or a draft essay or a draft piece of writing for a chapter, please be absolutely meticulous in getting it to have the correct spelling, punctuation, and grammar, because there's nothing worse for the reader than having to ward off all these errors. It's very distracting, and you can't actually pay attention to the content if there are any errors present. So go to that extra mile and edit your work really carefully. Try not to have overly long sentences. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Try not to quote, do direct quotes unless it's really, really impossible not to paraphrase. Try not to have paragraphs that are less than 3 sentences long, and of course never use contractions like it's or that's, or where the word is actually supposed to be written out in full. Okay, so just finally to end, common errors. Be very sure that you know the difference between methodology and methods and use that correctly. I've said this already, correct use of your style. Check your work that there's one font throughout. The font size can change in headings, but do not mix up fonts in one piece of writing. Never use italics or bold. It's very insulting to the reader. You don't need to wave in their face what you think that they may not get by bolding something or using italics. The only time you use italics would be if you were using a Latin word or a phrase, or if you were using, say, chunks of interview material. Maybe you would choose to put that in italics, but don't use it as a way of alerting the reader to, this is important, so don't miss it. They're not going to miss it. They're going to get whatever you say. You don't need to put it in bold. And please use direct quotes intentionally. Don't just bomb them out. Lots and lots and lots of these quotation marks. It's kind of a lazy way of presenting your argument. You really want to use maybe judiciously a few phrases of direct quotes to back up what you are already saying. But unless it's doing that, don't use quotes. Okay, so how are you feeling about your writing now? How are you feeling now about your writing? Let's go into some questions and answers. I'm quite interested to know whether if you've learned something about academic writing styles, something that surprised you, something that you will do differently now. But it's over to you. So any questions, please? Or any further questions?
I'll just say thank you.
Oh.
Sorry.
I think I'll say something if that's all right.
Yes.
Hi, that was great. Thank you. And it's just a good reminder. I remember when I first went to a session like this at the beginning of my PhD, I was like, oh, yes, I'll do all that. And of course, then I've just got so bogged down by, collecting data, all the ethics, everything like that. And now that I'm actually in the writing, I realize that I'm always focusing on the content, and I'm forgetting about all these all these really important structures that make the job of writing a little bit easier. And this is just a perfect reminder. In fact, I've just written down your intentional verbs and I've stuck them on my wall, because that's also, I find out, you know it all, but when you're in the middle of trying to work out what you're trying to say, you forget to use those as little scaffolds. And so it was a really great reminder and very timely for me, because I'm just in the mud of trying to write up my findings.
Fabulous. So, and don't just use that list, add to it. So make a long list of verbs so that you can like relax. You can like go, I don't know what verb here. Okay, then you go and look at your list and then choose the one that seems to be the best one. It just takes some of the strain of writing away, doesn't it?
And I think that sometimes when I'm in the middle of writing, I get so tired of trying to recreate a new sentence each time that actually having, it's what we do at school with students. We give them scaffolds so that they can, build a better approach, and it feels like that's the same. So yeah, it was a great reminder and refresher for me. Thank you.
Great. So I just want to say,
Nikki, would you mind putting that slide back up if you wouldn't mind? We just had a question from one of the group as well about what the words were again. Thank you.
This is just some of the words. You need like a list 10 times longer than that. I think that was just from one paragraph or something that I extracted. But so please don't think that that's a definitive list. It's not. It's, you want to literally, I actually recommend looking at, Jody, we can make My Thesis available, can't we? Because you can just whiz through My Thesis and literally extract all the verbs from it and make your own list, and then it's done. I just want to say one thing quickly, just to build on what Jane said. A common myth, and it is quite paradoxical. So in the one sense, you want to have a lot of verbs that you draw on to nuance your writing, because you don't want to just say argue, 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 argue the whole way through the writing. It just is, the reader's going to go, this person actually, either A, they haven't read anything, or B, they're too afraid to present their argument. So from that point of view, we want variety. But paradoxically, we don't want variety in terms of consistency. So the aim and the purpose of what you start off with in your introduction has to be exactly what you found in your conclusion, and you relate back using the exact words. You're also going to use the exact words when you have a section heading, and then your topic sentence. It's so comforting to the reader when the topic sentence actually reflects the same words in the section heading. There's nothing worse than to see variety there, because it's just the person that reading goes, well, now are we talking about that and that, or are we talking about this and this? It destroys trust in the reader, and if the reader can't trust you, then they're going to get annoyed, and then they're not going to give you a good grade, because they want to trust you and relax and just enjoy your content that you've written. They don't want to worry about the technical side of it. So paradoxically, there are these two things. On the one hand, we've got to be consistent and repetitive, and that's a good thing. But then in the use of verbs, we need to be extremely aware and intuitive and very on it for nuancing there. Okay, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Who had another question? I think somebody else had something.
Nikki, do segues always come at the end of paragraphs or sometimes at the beginning? Because I've tended to use them at the beginning.
Well, a segue is both.
Okay.
The end leads into the beginning. That's what a segue is. So it will be a very clever use of, in the last sentence, you might say, well, this and this is what happened, but there's another very interesting thing, which is this, and then that's the next section. So yeah, they link together. One paragraph is linked to the next paragraph by a segue, which is repeating a thought or a word or an idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. And thanks for today. It's been incredibly helpful to have writing explained in this way and laid out for us.
Oh, I'm so happy. That's fabulous. I mean, people will think we're such geeks. I mean, they'll think we're the biggest nerds on the planet.
That's fine.
Actually spend a few hours unpicking all of this. But, you know, we tend to get told just go and do it. And the how is not made explicit to us, you know. So, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. So if any more questions at this time? Okay.
You're happy to finish up at that point then, Nikki?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you so much. It was very helpful. I'm about to start my master's level write-ups. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm available for help. I've been working with PhD, masters, and honors students for 5 years now. So, you know, just drop me an email if you need any help. I'd be very happy to have a look at your work. You know, just give some input. Okay, well, thanks, Jody. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikki. You're getting some lovely thank yous in the chat box. Everybody's showing their appreciation, saying how much they enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, guys. It was an absolute pleasure. Love that we're all such crazy nerds and find this stuff important.
I just included in the chat box, Nikki, that the recording of the presentation will be available on our SCPA YouTube channel. So if people just search that in YouTube, it will come up as of tomorrow. So we will just make sure the editing is right on the recording. So if it runs over a little at the end or anything, we will chop that off and make it all neat and put that up as of tomorrow.
Okay. So Jody, can you perhaps just also mention the previous seminar, because that went into, that might be useful to this group as well.
Yeah, so Nikki also did a seminar, how long ago now, Nikki? Maybe a month ago, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, on academic writing skills, and also a valuable resource. And that is also sitting there on the YouTube channel, as is all recordings of our training workshops. So I encourage everybody to just perhaps even just have a scroll through at your leisure and see what training is available there, because it all sits there as a resource for our members. So I encourage you to have a look at that YouTube channel of ours.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Jody. We appreciate you guys very, very much for your...
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to provide this presentation, Nikki, and thank you everybody for coming along. Any further questions, don't hesitate. Nikki has shared her email address, and you're welcome to email me at SCPA Gold Coast, which is also in the chat box.
Jody, I just want to say one last thing quickly, and that is that just to give people a heads up that I'm going to be doing that presentation on liminal emotions in November. So for those of you that are experiencing any kind of anxiety or you know, just emotional difficulties, I'm going to present the empirical data around that experience of liminality in an HDR degree, and how to mitigate those you know, this reality. So that's coming up in the future as well.
Amazing. I'll definitely be tuning in for that one.
Oh, it's makes for interesting listening, I can tell you that much. It's like reality TV. All right, back to you, Jody. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No, no problem. We'll finish it there, and I wish you all a lovely remainder of the afternoon. And we look forward to working with you again at another workshop soon.
All right. All right. Take care, all of you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.